We needed a stretch break between the last meeting and this listening session. We want to welcome you all to the meeting with the HR Finance Committee, which is assembled here and online. The purpose of tonight is to give you an overview of the American Rescue Plan Act, which was enacted by the federal government, and to engage you in discussions about how those dollars should be spent by the county. The American Rescue Plan Act was adopted, and it was a $1.9 trillion federal spending package intended to provide economic and other relief related to the COVID pandemic. One of the allocations was $65 million for counties, including Marathon County. And in the case of Marathon County, we look to receive approximately $26.3 million in two what are known as tranches or payments. We received the first one earlier this year, and in 12 plus months, we'll receive a second payment from in addition to the money that came to Marathon County, and approximately an equal amount is distributed among other local units of government in the county, such as the city of Wausau received approximately $15 million in amounts as low as approximately $100,000 for some of the smaller towns. We're limited in how we can spend those funds. They can be related to expenses incurred in response to the COVID pandemic for health emergency or negative impacts. That includes our efforts by the public health community, impacts to businesses, residents, and others. It also allows us to look at replacing lost revenue for government services as a result of the public health emergency. We're in the process of calculating what that lost revenue might be, and we can replace that. And the advantage of looking at lost revenues is that that money can then be used to be spent on other activities within county government that aren't necessarily covered under these provisions or these limitations. It also has a narrow authorization for investments in infrastructure, specifically water and sewer projects and broadband expansion. The county has been looking at the issue of broadband and how we can work with other partners and potentially expand broadband services throughout the county. We're looking at whether it's our role alone or whether we would work with other units of government. We can also spend that money on premium pay for essential workers. Within the context of how we can spend that money, there's the ability to make loans to businesses to help troubled businesses that were impacted as a result of the pandemic. There's potential for rental assistance and other forms of assistance to individuals. We know that we can't spend the money in certain areas. It can't be deposited in any pension fund. It can't, it must be used to cover costs that are incurred from the enactment of the act in March through projects that are obligated between now and December 31st of 2024. And the funds, we can obligate those funds and they must finally be spent by December 31st of 2026. It's important to recognize that this is a one-time opportunity. And it's meant to help us recover and boost the local economy, invest in those infrastructure projects. Funding must support sustainable activities and not create future liability for the county. The worst thing in the world for us to do would be to start new programs that carry on beyond that December 31st date and then lack the ability to pay for those in the future. So we are looking for investments that are time limited, that respond to the pandemic, and don't create that long-term obligation. And we have opportunities for input. We appreciate your coming today. This is the second of 3 meetings. We have the third meeting next Tuesday at the Hatley Public Library in the community room. We also have a provision for online feedback with the same questions that we'll be asking you today. And the public will have the ability to respond between now and in August 20th. Those questions and that information will be translated and put on the website tomorrow in both Hmong and Spanish, in addition to the version that we currently have. In addition, we encourage you to work with your county board supervisor and provide them with information. Before we go into the discussion questions, Kurt, is there anything that you'd like to add from an overview perspective, because you've been tracking it as a member of the Wisconsin Counties Association Board of Directors and active with DACO?
I guess just the one, and I don't know that we've talked about it, you know, we obviously have the restrictions and or the permitted uses that are spelled out in the federal legislation, but I guess I will remind, because it was evident today on the NACO call that other counties in other states and or in the state of Wisconsin also are running into some of the same issues, and that is that we have to be cognizant of state statutes and the restrictions that state statutes imply and impose. So even though, for example, one of the permitted uses is the ability to provide funding for nonprofits, it still must meet, and that is clear in the federal legislation, but there has to be a ability in state statutes to meet that same requirement. So in other words, state statutes are a little bit more restrictive than potentially the federal legislation. And so I just caution everybody that other states are running into the same issue, and so we need to be clear when it comes to if it's a nonprofit that we're looking to receive some funding, that it be a permitted use under state statutes also.
So with that, we appreciate your being here tonight. We'd like to ask you, and this can be if you have comments you'd like to make, come on up and present them. But we'd like to have a dialogue with you relative to any thoughts that you have. But we're looking for input in what economic impacts have you witnessed as a result of the pandemic, and what would it look like to address these items? How has it impacted you? How has it impacted businesses? And if we did make that investment, what would it look like, and how might it help? What does economic recovery look like for you? And what opportunities are there to partner with other local municipalities to address these issues? Again, Marathon County has 26.3 million. There's an equal amount that's out there in other communities. Are there opportunities for us to leverage that to deal with issues, if it's homelessness, if it's COVID response, if it's other items, behavioral health with North Central Health Care Center and Lincoln and Langley counties? Are there some opportunities for us to work together with others to address some of those critical needs that would be eligible cost? And then we're also looking at what criteria should we use to evaluate proposals on how we use these funds. I think the county is, again, going to look at one-time uses, not committing future county boards. We have to look at pandemic related, and there's some flexibility within the Department of Revenue guidelines, but we'd like to know how we should use those. So what we'd like to do is get your input, and again, if you can supplement your comments through going online and providing us with those written comments. We're hoping to take and compile the responses that we receive at all three of these listening sessions, as well as through other sources in the survey. We'll try to develop a plan from this committee to the full county board. Right now, we've accepted the first payment of 13+ million from the federal government, and we've put it into an account. We can't spend that money. We have to transfer the funds out of that account. And so we're looking to develop a plan on how we might use those funds We don't have to allocate all of those dollars up front, but we have to be on pace to have those funds committed by December 31st of 2024, which will come sooner than not. And so with that, do the committee members have anything that they'd like to add, or any questions that you have? If not, we'll turn it over to the public. Lance?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just another thing to get perhaps your juices flowing with respect to some of these questions. I think examples, are at least for me, are sometimes helpful to illustrate a point. And with respect to the fourth question, what criteria should be considered as we evaluate proposals for the use of these funds? As Chair Robinson referenced, we recognize, and I think the county board recognizes, that this is going to be an iterative process. We have through December 31st of 2024 to really finalize our plan. So when I think of what criteria should be considered, those are the things that, there's going to be ideas that come up after today, as Chair Robinson referenced. If you have those ideas, you can go online and utilize the online form to submit those. But how should we look at those ideas that come up in the future? Chair Robinson referenced one that I think makes complete sense, which is we want to make sure we really don't take on projects or programs that are going to have ongoing liabilities for the county. So that makes sense because, to be very blunt, county finances are extremely tight. We have levy limits in the state of Wisconsin, so we don't have new funds coming in. We really need to be mindful of what liabilities we essentially are creating. And the other one that has occurred to us that the committee has discussed and staff have discussed is this idea that we don't want to duplicate programs at a local level through the American Rescue Plan Act dollars that perhaps exist at another level of government or exist through another form of funding. So I'll give you an example. Chair Robinson referenced rental assistance. In Marathon County, we do have existing programs that provide for rental assistance, at least they're limited term programs. Small business assistance. You may have seen that the state of Wisconsin put a fair amount of their ARPA funding, as they did with CARES funding, into small business assistance. So is this idea of not duplicating effort, but instead of doing so, funneling people to the resources that already exist, is that meaningful? Our sense is that it makes sense to do that, but perhaps you have a different opinion. Those are the things we want to hear with respect to that last question. What criteria, what things should we be thinking about as we evaluate those new ideas for utilization of those American Rescue Plan Act dollars? And then the only other restriction, I don't think it's overly meaningful, but we can't use the American Rescue Plan Act dollars to fulfill any legal settlements, but just to make sure everyone's aware of that.
Kurt?
And I guess the only other, one of the things that I've always, and we've had these discussions internally, is how do we set and spend these dollars to set the county up for economic success long-term? So is there areas that these dollars can be utilized that if you were looking at it from a business sense, how does it return on investment? Now, it's not a business, obviously. The government is technically not a business, but from an economic standpoint, it's one-time dollars. How can we utilize these dollars to help offset long-term needs from the taxpayers to set up the county for success in an economic standpoint? So I think that needs to be in the forefront of the individuals and the board.
So with that, does anybody wish to share any thoughts with us? And there is a sign-up sheet out there. We'd ask that you please register. So, Chuck?
Well, let me take a stab at this. Chuck Adorsey, and I was, I have the fortune of being the managing director for Wausau Opportunity Zone, which purchased the mall recently and has been involved in the demolition and the revitalization of that. So I guess what I'd like to say just to the first question is that really when COVID hit, even though the mall was having its struggles, the COVID really took the mall down. And through the course of a number of months when it was closed and also as regional retailers left, it was apparent that the mall was doomed. The other factor of that would be the fact that at the same time you have all of these individual entrepreneurs who are operating on 3rd Street who depended on some of that traffic as well as you know, the aspect of running a small business, if you would, of 3rd Street. So when I look at the economic impact that COVID had on our downtown, I think it was apparent that it really took a lot of people back. So as we look forward then, how could these dollars impact what would be the revitalization of the downtown? And I just put it in that way. I think the revitalization of the Wausau downtown is crucial for our county, it's crucial for our city, and it's crucial in our economic development. If you look at any top-tier cities around the country who are trying to attract talent, innovative companies, and make placemaking, one of the key factors in that is to have a vital downtown, one in which is made up of residencies, retails, services, etc. And so if we can do that, if we can accomplish that here as a community, and the support of these funds go towards some of the aspects of that plan, I can't see it as anything other than a win, if you would. To your point, I think the economic impact long-term is absolutely crucial. Are we going to invest in something that keeps returning year after year after year after year? This is that type of investment. It's not only investment in some of the aspects of the GWPP plan, it's also an investment in terms of attracting talent to our community, innovative companies, and spearheading some of the other activities, if you would, around the downtown. So to me, what that would look like is focusing on a number of the aspects of this plan for the downtown, the revitalization of the downtown, looking at the GWPP's plan in terms of prosperity for our county and how that is integrated in the downtown, and then be able to take aspects of that plan that would satisfy, if you would, the criteria that's being asked for in the plan. Thank you.
Well, Chuck, if I could, just, what would that look like? You know, the greater, I'm not sure everybody is aware of the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership Plan. So how would you see the county and/or the city collaborating, in this case, on that project?
Well, the GWPP plan was a plan that was put together by TIPS. It was a consulting organization that was hired through the foundation at the chamber. But it was also very much involved with taking information from county folks, city folks, citizenry, and so forth. And the end result of that plan is they focus on 3 specific things: how we could attract talent to our community and how we could keep talent in our community. The obvious point of that is that this talent is going to serve our industries and serve our residencies long-term and give people a place to live and work, raise a family, and invest. That was an important part of it. The other important part was innovative companies. So to attract innovative companies who are embracing, if you would, Industry 4.0 and this new theory of manufacturing. And so that aspect of the plan is again an important ingredient in terms of how we grow our community, which is rich, if you would, in a heritage of industry. And third is placemaking. Placemaking should probably be first, because what you're trying to do in placemaking is create an environment where people get attracted to, you know, where recreation and where schools and where arts and where community functions and community values in a form of life, if you would, is embraced. And so in that placemaking, the downtown Wausau became a specific target. The mall downtown became a specific target. Clark Island became a specific target because part of that, again, is preserving our historic heritage. Clark Island was on the verge of being demoed, if you would, the powerhouse. And now that powerhouse is under a 40-year lease with the chamber, and the chamber has stepped up and bought the depot. So we're going to have an environmental climate, if you would, on Clark Island. So anyway, those are the aspects that are involved in the prosperity, if you would, of Marathon County. And if a segment can be focused in on with these funds of that to me, John, is what it would look like.
Any other questions for Chuck? Matt, we thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Renee, did you want to make any comments? I'm going off the sign-in sheet.
I don't have specific comments. I have some.
If you can come up, we're recording this for public access, so if you could use a microphone.
I don't think it's fine. I may have to ask some questions once I understand a little bit more about process.
Well, come on up and ask those questions. And this will be available to the public.
Hi, y'all. Renee Krings, Economic Development Specialist with the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership. I echo a lot of the comments that Chuck Godorsky shared today. My participation here today is truly to just learn, listen, try to understand a little bit more about the funds that are available, the usage, what they can be used for, what they can't be used for, and then try to understand a little bit more about the process. So understanding timeline, understanding what does that application process look like, trying to understand what that criteria might look like. Does that criteria align with the county's current plans in terms of your strategic plans, and then also looking at maybe some of the criteria of post-pandemic and what that has done from just demographics and how that has impacted different industry sectors. So those are the types of things that I was kind of curious to learn more about today, and also just understanding, as a county board, what does that process look like for you when you're developing, creating that plan, so that everyone who's interested in potentially applying for those funds, how do they go about putting together a proposal and trying to best determine what does that allocation process look like in terms of prioritizing those funds.
So let me just take a stab at trying to clarify the process. I think what we're trying to do today is just find out what the public's thoughts are on where we might want to look at it. I think what we will do is we will take that back, look at, again, the ever-changing interpretations of what the Department of Revenue wants in terms of eligible activities. We'll look at the context of how do these fit into the criteria of public health and economic impacts, which is, I think, what you're looking for, and develop that a plan. And I would imagine that we'll have opportunities for public involvement in that plan, and I would anticipate that the plan will look like, it'll be broken down into categories. What will we do from the public health perspective in responding to the pandemic? And these are just concepts, and please correct me if you have different thoughts, but then where will the county be making investments in its infrastructure and other things on that one-time basis? Where are there opportunities for us to collaborate? Where are there opportunities for us to promote economic development, the concept of broadband expansion and others, and how will we meet those other eligible activities? So we'll be looking at that, but I appreciate your asking those questions. I think we're still in that learning mode. Mm-hmm. The intent originally was to have this joint meeting with the city back in June, but we just didn't feel at that time that we had enough information, and I think we're still learning as we go ahead. So we welcome thoughts, and we'll evaluate those, and I would imagine we'll make some initial recommendations that will be, as Lance said, iterative, and we'll build off of it because we've got 26 million, 13 in hand. And we'll go forward, but I think it's important for us to begin that process of identifying priorities. And I think your comment that we look to our strategic plan would be helpful. It would be, I think, helpful for us if you could share, picking up on Chuck's presentation, the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnerships report and recommendations, and if we could forward that to the committee for their consideration. So if I could impose on you to do that.
I'd be happy to.
Kurt?
I'm just going to add one other thing. Today, again, I was on a NACO call, National Association of Counties call, and one of the things that we're still struggling with is the rules are not finalized yet from Treasury. The information that NACO has tends to indicate, obviously the time period for response to the proposed rules has closed. That was in July. They suspect that we may have some new final rules on no earlier than mid-September. So there's continuation of additional questions that keep getting posed to Treasury as far as allowed uses of these funds. And their clear recommendations is, don't be so quick to jump into spending until you know for sure that you're not going to get into a position where the federal government comes in and says that's not a qualified use. So I think that's why we're deliberate in our process, and I don't think that we have any set expectation as to when a plan or a definitive plan on the spending of every dollar is finalized in the next 2 weeks or anything like that. So, but clearly, I thank you for your input.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I think Lance was just mentioning that this will be incorporated into our budget discussions, and it will be both included and separate from, but it will be obviously an important part of our considerations when we move ahead in the context of how does this impact county budgets, how does it, what opportunities are there for us within that budgeting process to incorporate these funds. But again, I think, Chuck, you raised that issue and of collaboration, and I think if the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership is concerned about what's happening across the street, we need to have those discussions with the city in collaboration and looking at what other funds are. And if you've been paying attention to what's going on in the state level, the governor has been releasing on occasion announcements or press releases indicating that $100 million went into broadband expansion. There was money that went into tourism and tourism help. And I think that's getting back to Chair Gibbs' comments earlier, we don't want to, in Lance's comments, we don't want to invest in areas that we can cover somewhere else because, again, it's that one-time nature and you can only spend one-time dollars once. So we'll try to be creative and pursue those other sources first, but we welcome opportunity. So right now we don't have a blank wall. We've got a blank tile on a wall, yet to be defined because the Department of Revenue and the federal rules keep evolving, for lack of a better term. So we know that we can use it for economic impacts on those industries. So the next person is Vicki Resich from McDevco. Vicki, is there anything you'd like to? Please.
The short one. Thank you. Vicki Rasick, Economic Development from McDevco here in Wausau. Starting with Safer at Home, we've seen a lot with small businesses throughout Marathon County. We've handled a lot of different funding for small businesses throughout Marathon County, the city of Wausau. What we're seeing right now is women entrepreneurs, business leaders have left the workforce in growing numbers, not only in Marathon County, but across the United States. They've left to take care of their children, and on the other end of the spectrum, they've left to take care of their elderly parents that have been left at home also. We need to be able to do something to help them to come back into the workforce. As it was just stated, the United States is 10 million short on workforce. It was just on the news. So training and education and getting them back into the workforce, being able to have safe childcare for their children, safe places for their parents, whether that's assisted living, nursing homes, or whatever, we need to look at that so that they feel confident that both ends of the spectrum for their lives are being taken care of. We're working with a lot of low to middle income businesses and minority. We're also finding that just above that low to middle income, we're missing a whole group of people that are not rich and well-to-do, don't have the bigger businesses, that are LLCs and small corporations that we're not hitting with our funding because of the requirements out there. Broadband, of course, is a #1 thing for Marathon County as we see workers staying at home and small businesses out in the community and our ag suffering out there. As we go forward, I think that we need to revision how small businesses work together throughout Marathon County with each other, and we can collaborate better throughout municipalities as we move forward. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments on Vicki? I think that issue of human and capital investment is important. Supervisor Krause.
Thank you. I have a question. Do you have any idea of how many women's businesses in the Wausau area or Marathon County area have closed due to the COVID epidemic?
Well, they're talking throughout north central Wisconsin on the Wisconsin Regional Planning that we could lose about 26% of our women small businesses. You know, as you look at that, women contribute $9 trillion to the economy across the United States. So for us to lose that, that's a very important resource, and it's important to our families also.
So what would assistance look like to those businesses? How, you know, you've got the PPP, or is it the PPP?
It was
It was PPP.
The PPP that was made the loans available and others. So what, you know, looking at it from the perspective of if you're a policymaker and you have a pot of money, what would the distribution of those funds look like?
Well, when you talk PPP, what we found with small business owners, because of the lack of education, and they thought that they were saving themselves funding, is they didn't pay themselves. So when they didn't pay themselves, they did not qualify for the PPP because they weren't out there paying payroll taxes. So education is a big part of when we bring these people back and we want to get them back in the workforce. How do you run your businesses correctly? How do you do this so that your budgets and your cash flow and you're managing your business?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions for her? If not, Supervisor Krause, you have signed up?
In addition to housing.
Again,
this
if
is
you
on-
could, just for the record, identify yourself, so.
My name is Donna Krause. I'm a Marathon County Board Supervisor. In addition to the importance of housing and having places of business to work and earn a living, also important is transportation. There's been the fear during the COVID epidemic and now with the Delta virus that touching a gasoline pump transmits the COVID virus. So the answer to that is to wear gloves or have an electric car where you can charge up the battery in your garage. So transportation is going to become more and more important as people move into this area and this area expands. We want people to come into this area from other areas, and they are. We have people coming in from Chicago, Milwaukee, other states. I meet them all the time. So what we need to do with these young people coming in is they're more interested in the environment than the older people are. We're creatures of habit. We don't want to change. But the young people grab at change. They're ready for it. They seek it out. So in addition to our spending all this money on parks and bicycle trails for recreation, we need to spend money on public transportation to keep us from building up a carbon footprint with more forest fires, more flooding, tornadoes, earthquakes, and all kinds of other problems that are coming along with this. So increasing transportation, the benefit of public transportation is very important. During COVID, more people are going to doctors. Do we have buses stopping at dental clinics, at private clinics, at other doctors' offices on the way? No. In the 25 years I've been in Wausau, I have not seen our public shelters increase at all. We only have 5. 25 years ago, we still have only 5, 25 years since. So we need to have more bus shelters so that these young people, our young workers who want to save the climate, can take public transportation. They can stand or sit in our public shelters that are solar operated and have handicap access. In a city this size, we should at least have 15 to 20 bus shelters. Where I stand to get the bus, I stand in the mud. I stand in the snow. There is no sidewalk there. I have to stand in the street to catch the bus. This is like being in a cow town. This is not like being in a progressive, advanced urban city that we should have. Now, the city and the county have land which could be used to put bus shelters on. They've been building apartments and condominiums and duplexes on city property. Right next to the house where I live, there's a huge area that could easily have a really nice modern bus shelter. Now, the bus shelters are run $3,000 to $5,000 for one unit, and that depends upon how fancy you want to get with a bus shelter. But also, we could have park benches. I know along the new trail along the river that there's several park benches where people can sit down and enjoy the river and look at the trees, and sometimes people are swimming or boating there. We could easily get a park bench. I know you can get them from Menards or Fleet Farm for $100 to $200 instead of spending $3,000 to $5,000 on a bus shelter. But I think it is important that we think of the future, people getting to work. Are we going to have more parking spaces for the cars as they drive into Wausau for work in the next 3 to 5 years, 10 years? We need places where people can pick up the bus with more bus stops and more access to medical facilities. I thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to comment?
My name is Dave Baker. I was fortunate that I got COVID in March 18th of 2020 and recovered in 2 weeks. So then having immunity, I lived my life as I did before. And my business was quite fine. I've been busy from 2012 through 2020 up until April of this year. So COVID did not impact my business. I have Fortune 100 customers who managed to do quite well through COVID. However, since the current administration has been in office, inflation, threat of raised taxes, all of this government spending, my business is quite bad now. I don't think it was because of COVID. I think it might have been because of the response to COVID. So I would like you, as in terms of what does economic recovery look like to me, going back to what we were before, get rid of all this government spending, cut back to where we were, give the people back to the power of the people, don't take our money and spend it on programs. What I would like to see you do with the money is use it for property tax relief. I know that's not in the thing, but there are at least 13 states that have sued the federal government saying that because you cannot use it for property tax relief, that is illegal. I'd like to enter that into the record. If it cannot be used for property tax relief, what I would like to see it used for is to increase our public safety and criminal justice. From what we read in the news, there's people sitting in jail that do not have access to a speedy trial. So perhaps we could use some money to temporarily increase the resources in our criminal justice system and get those people to a speedy trial. And that would be something that we wouldn't have to do long-term, as opposed to like adding police officers where we might not want to do that because we'd be committed, but perhaps we could bring some retired people back, you know, for a few 6 months or a year. Because I think I read that there's people that have been sitting in jail for longer than their sentences were. So that would, you know, one of our constitutional rights is that we are supposed to have a speedy and fair trial, and I think that's something we need to address. So thank you for the opportunity to comment.
That probably just interject that problem was there before COVID and will likely be there for a while, but that's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions, Mr. Baker? Not? If you could also come up and identify, can I get you just put your address on there? I've got, I know you're from Corona Winter, so.
My name is Cindy Zelenka, and I'm a resident of the town of Texas. And I guess I'm here representing that population that is really lacking in high-speed internet. We all know how difficult it was for those students during COVID. I have 2 teenage daughters who were provided with Chromebooks during the COVID pandemic. And unfortunately, we had terrible internet, and at many times we had no internet at all. It was really difficult for at least those in my community, town of Texas, town of Maine, town of Wausau. So I would like to stress the importance of getting high-speed internet out to the rural areas. We have quite a few telehealth medicine appointments, and many of them have to just be done on our phones. We can't get computer access enough to stream. I hate to mention, but we have 3 satellite dishes on our house, which we would like to get rid of. And there is a lot of folks out in our area that work from home. During the pandemic, my company's doors were shut. We were all asked to work from home. And many times I had to go find somebody in town who's got high-speed internet just so I could work during that time. So I would really like to stress the importance of considering that. I don't know if that's handled as a county-wide thing or if it's during, or like handled with each township. Is that something that you guys are familiar with? I don't know. Is that something I should bring up to
You're
our?
looking at the chair of the county's broadband task force. If I just interject, the problem is that the county, under current state statutes, we can't provide the service to the home. We have to work with internet service providers. The good news is that because of the pandemic, the need for internet connections that are reliable and inadequate has been highlighted, but we have partnered with, we submitted several grant applications, or partnered with internet service providers on several grant applications to the Public Service Commission, including that would serve you. Bug Tussle has one. We're working currently with Charter on an expansion of service that may affect part of your area. And I know that Frontier also submitted a grant application. But we continue to look at others, and we're looking at
We need
100.
reliable internet.
Well, this would be fiber to the home. The way that the federal government is moving is they're moving to fiber to the premise. And that's one, and they're putting minimums in of 100 megabits per second up and down. So there's no latency, and it's more reliable. So we hear you, but there are opportunities for us to do more and partner with others.
So is there an actual task force that, is it
Marathon County has a
something that
task
the
force.
public can participate in?
The membership is set, but you certainly are welcome to participate in the meetings and watch the meetings or listen in on the meetings.
Okay, I appreciate it.
So if
Okay,
you could fill this out, we'll get your address and share that.
okay, thank you.
Anybody, okay, if you could. And if you could take that over there and have them fill that out. You didn't, we're gonna have it come over to you and.
Okay, I'm Bernie Corsten. I'm the director of NAMI, which is National Alliance on Mental Illness. And right now, we're housed in a church because they're the ones that offer free rent, free space for us. And during the COVID and even before, we would have, I'll tell you a little bit about NAMI and the purpose of it. We do education, support, and advocacy for members, for individuals and families with a mental illness. And before the COVID, we would have groups coming in, I would say 20 at a time for the educational piece. This would be for the family members. A lot of times people with the mental illness do not realize that they have an illness. So we help educate individual family members of the diagnosis, and we advocate for them. This is a state organization, plus it's a national organization that does a lot of advocacy for people and individuals with mental health. So I guess what I'm sort of like getting at is that because of the COVID and being housed in a church doesn't make it very accessible to the public to come in and talk to us. Our doors are locked and because of the church regulations, and I think that in the future we need to grow our NAMI as big as Appleton or any of the bigger areas in the state. And I think that for me as an individual running it all by myself, I'm a part-time staff person, we need to have funds to add more programming and staffing to help supplement what I think and what NAMI organization wants to do for Marathon County. We also represent Lincoln and Langlade, and this is not something that one person should take on. So I have with me Jennifer.
Yes, I'm Jennifer Johnson, and I'm a liaison I work with the mentally ill and the professionals. If you can hear me, I'm not much on public speaking. But yes, I work as a liaison between, with the families, and I work between the mentally ill people to the professionals, kind of like a helper. And I do see that getting funding for our organization is kind of crucial to with the COVID and everything. It certainly affected, people and families with the pandemic, and we're just hoping to grow and help people and get funding for the organization.
And what would that look like?
Well, we're different than North Central Healthcare, and they sponsor people in crisis. We're helping the families. We're working with the mentally ill directly. Bernie can tell you a lot more as she's worked more with this. And as she mentioned, it could be having a building, getting our people educated, getting out there and making people more aware of us. We're here to help the residents of Marathon County. So if you want to add.
We did have this idea, or I did, of being a part of the nonprofit organization, downtown that's being put up on Grand Avenue, I believe. But since we don't really have funds for any kind of rent, or we have very short, we don't have the funds to actually pay rent for even to participate part-time. And I could see us sort of starting in a joint nonprofit, and I think Neighbors Place and et cetera are going to be there. But I think my vision is to sort of see something bigger, so we're more accessible to people than the back door of a church.
Any questions? Any other questions? Vicki, I see you raising your hand. Please come up. Again, because we're recording this,
I understand that mental health and anxiety has grown during COVID. So with the growth of this, what are you seeing in your numbers that you're seeing for people, and you're helping them compared to before COVID and now? And what do you think is going to happen then through the future?
Well, we do our Zoom. We do our family support through Zoom. Unfortunately, we have to do it that way. So I'm just going to give you an example of the two people that came on last month. Both of them had family members with a suicide. We're not professional suicide grief people. These are serious issues that we're dealing with. People need to have accessible service and someone to talk to, and a trained person to talk to when they're going through a severe family issue.
And our organization focuses not only on the mentally ill, but the families. So we're very important in helping support, the whole nucleus.
Mm-hmm.
Supervisor Krause.
Thank you, Chair. Could you tell us about what programs you have going right now to help people in the community?
Well, we have there's a couple of them. We have Family to Family, which is a family course, 8-week course for family members. We have a peer-to-peer. Now these will start in the fall. Peer-to-peer, and that's held at Community Corner Clubhouse, and that's an 8-week session for peers. Peers of those are individuals with a mental illness. And then we have the family support, and then we have peer support. And both of them right now are Zoom. And in addition, we have a club called Raise Your Voice Club that we were able to get up into the Merrill School, and we have some individuals who want to help put that club into other local schools here in the area. There are 2 volunteers that want to do that. Those are our existing programs right now.
And And we'd certainly like to build our organization to reach out to more family members, the mentally ill and the families.
All right. Any other questions? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Christy, do you want to make any comments? Yeah, okay. Anything else? If not, we thank you again for your presence and sharing your thoughts. Again, we have opportunities to go online, and we'll have one more informational meeting in Hatley. Please submit those. If you missed the August 20th deadline, I think we'll still take those because, again, this is a ongoing iterative process. We look forward to receiving the report from the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership, and if others have thoughts, please go online or share those with any members of the committee. So anything else from the committee at this time? If not, our next meeting is August 17th at the Hatley Public Library. And if there's nothing else, we are adjourned. Thank you for coming.